3/4 of the Church of England priests are saying in a survey conducted by The Times. Good idea. Congratulations to them for coming up with that. It's the most wide-ranging poll of frontline Anglican clergy, and it's found a desire for significant changes in teaching on sex, sexuality, marriage, and the role of women. Here's a thought. Would you be concerned if the next ABC, Archbishop of Canterbury, was a woman? Wouldn't bother me in the as long as the best person in the job. I couldn't give a damn. Man, woman, don't care. Would it bother you? Bear in mind it is quite a small c conservative organisation. Majority of Anglican priests want the church to conduct same-sex weddings, drop opposition to premarital and gay sex. I mean, do they... How many people now get married who've not had ladies and gentlemen, or ladies and ladies, or gentlemen and gentlemen prior to their wedding? Let's be honest about it. How many... I would have thought 99.9, unless you're in certain... I was going to say certain faiths. If you're a Christian, we are pretty relaxed about that sort of thing. Unless you're high Mount Everest church, you will have probably had ladies and gentlemen, or ladies and ladies, or gentlemen. You know what I'm saying. The poll has uncovered high levels of stress among priests, many of whom feel overstretched amid fears churches' efforts to arrest the decline in attendance will fail. Concerns this might ultimately lead to the extinction, their words, of the Church of England. Goodness me. Much to address.
I think underlying our history there is the Christian heritage, which still affects the way in which our society sees itself and wants to undergird our values, really, which I think are primarily Christian or related to the major world faiths. But I mean, if you compare ourselves with Nigeria, which is on statistical data a far more Christian country in terms of the number of people who regard themselves as Christian, we, I think, would see ourselves as being a more Christian country than Nigeria, because we actually have got a much more open view on many of the important issues to do with sexuality, to do with relationships and so on. And I think that's one of the reasons why the clergy are finding it quite difficult in the Church of England, because the Church of England is the leading church in the Anglican Communion, which is made up largely of churches from Africa particularly, where they're much more conservative approach. And the Church of England is being held back by its role in relation to the Anglican Communion from being more liberal on many of these issues. And the clergy want to be more liberal on many of these issues, and they're feeling we're being marginalised and made irrelevant as a result.
Should a church be liberal?
Well, I believe that the Christian faith is about love. It's about Jesus's mission to show that love and compassion to all people, regardless of who and what they are. I think their sexuality is irrelevant, and we should be celebrating love wherever it is. Now, I'm afraid for many Christians throughout the world, what I've just said is heresy. I think, though, in this country, for many of the clergy, what I've said isn't heresy. It's actually what they want to happen in the life and teaching of the church, to show that love and celebration of love wherever it may be.
You said earlier that you think society sees itself through some of Christianity's teaching. Can you expand on that a little bit, Bishop?
Well, I think as a society we are historically concerned about things to do with justice, compassion, truth. These things have arisen over the centuries from Christian teaching, which have lain at the heart of the way in which our institutions have been built. And in many ways, our society still turns to religion, even the Church of England, at times of national crisis and at times of national celebration, be it death of monarchs or be it as a major disaster of one kind or another. And that rooting is there within every community, because the parish churches in every community are still places where people go at times of crisis. So to that extent, we remain, if you like, a country which values its Christian heritage.
Why do you suppose the church has fallen behind?
Well, I think it's been torn apart in many ways by its own divisions. The church is still divided. There are those within the Church of England who would disagree violently with what I've just been saying because they have got a far more conservative approach. And society has moved on at the same time more rapidly than the church has been prepared to go. So the clergy are feeling between a rock and a hard place. It's not easy if you are living in a society where, for example, gay relationships are regarded as completely normal, and the church is finding it very difficult to recognise the normalcy of gay relationships.
Well, even more perversely, one could argue, Bishop, the Archbishop of Canterbury has welcomed gay blessings but won't actually perform them himself.
Yes, precisely.
Which is kind of a mixed message in a way, Bishop.
Well, that's what I was talking about before, Nick, in terms of his role as relation as head of the Anglican Communion, because he knows if he conducted gay blessings, his African archbishops would not speak to him again,
right,
and would say, we don't belong to the Anglican Communion anymore. And he's trying to hold that together.
The bishop, he wants to preserve the Church of England, but to what end? Possibly, I would say, to preserve his job. I think whether Christianity is relevant or not to this country is the irrelevant question, because it's not there to be relative. Church. The whole purpose of the church is to bring mankind back in communion with God, and so if that begins to shift with the sentiments of the public, then it loses its entire purpose. It's not supposed to be. It was never meant to be an institution.
What do you mean it wasn't meant to be an institution?
Well, the whole idea of Christianity now is that what I would term a cultural Christian. You ask someone in the street, "Oh, I'm a Christian," but what does that really mean to them? Have they professed faith in Christ and been baptized and are there purely to enjoy the glory of God, or are they just there to uphold what we term the British values? That's what I mean. This idea of Christianity has been watered down.
But you can have. I'm a little nervous because you can have British values and be Jewish, or Catholic, or Buddhist, or have no faith whatsoever, can't you?
Is that what you're calling British values? Sounds to me just like
you said
morality.
British. You said British values. I didn't.
But that's the term coined by the likes of the bishops on the Church of England. They're reducing Christianity to this idea of good morality, but it was never meant to be good morality. It was only ever meant to bring man back into communion with God. It was. It's losing its potency if you reduce it down to just these wishy-washy feelings of love. And
is it the church's job to stay up to date, or is part of its appeal? No, sorry, go ahead.
The problem is the church some members of the church are obsessed with without becoming extinct. They want to preserve their existence as opposed to preserving the role of the church which was to save souls. Like, the church either thrives or it dies. There's no middle ground. The moment it sits on the fence and becomes just about
it is sitting on the fence, because you have the Archbishop of Canterbury saying that he supports gay blessings, but he won't give one.
Well, then his priorities are wrong, because he should either stay in line with the gospel, which is probably not a popular opinion, but it is to not support it, or it's rejected completely by the public. Because what's the alternative? Then you have a church that is compromised and that is neither here nor there, neither good for the public nor good for the gospel.
No, we're not. And then a million more foreigners in, and they wonder. And now we've got to pay to buy houses for foreigners.
Liz, we've always had.
No, we haven't always had a lot of immigration.
Liz,
Liz,
what's the basic tenet of Christianity, would you say?
Yeah, love thy neighbour.
Do you think you're being loving towards your neighbours?
I'm not being unloving towards my neighbours. I'm just saying
that you said that they're outbreeding us.
Country.
Do you think that's a loving expression to say they're outbreeding us? Do you think that's loving?
No, it's not. Well, how is it a pejorative expression? It is a fact.
Well,
how else can you wrap it up except the English birth rate has gone through the floor, and yet people are coming here we haven't got room for them. They didn't want us in their country, and we've got to have them in ours. Why?
But do you think that's a very Christian attitude to have?
Well, it's not supposed to be a Christian or a non-Christian
I see.
attitude. It's
Okay.
just it's the
I'm just interested, and I absolutely respect your faith, and I hear what you say, and I sense you're probably an older generation than I, but you do seem to be sort of have a slightly mixed message in that you're saying we all should all support Christianity, but your views aren't
well, we should.
hugely Christian, some would argue.
But there's a difference, isn't there? We can be Christian. We're still out in Africa trying to do good out there.
I don't think with Jesus at Dover, he'd have turned the boats back.
Well, where would he have put them then?
Well,
We're
I
already
think
having students turned out in Huddersfield, of all places.
Well, I know, but I think he would have said, we've got to find room, wouldn't he?
Why?
I just
So
think
do we take them all? We don't even know who these
no,
people
of
are.
course we don't. No, you're right. It must be controlled. Of course it must be controlled. But I still don't see Jesus going to the middle of the channel and turning the boats round. Do you?